This video is going to go out to Thomas Smith, and I'm going to read your email word for word. Oh, don't worry, I have plenty more than one word. I'll be blunt. If you could have any less of an idea of what exactly you are talking about, then you would. Really? Let's go for it. This fictional character isn't living your life. There are many facets of her life that are identical or very closely similar to the things that I lived when I was her age. So, wrong. Okay? Maybe vaguely similar in certain facets. Vaguely similar? She drops her books, she gets laughed at. My books are taken from me, and I'm accosted. I'd say that's pretty dang similar. The only difference between what she experienced in that film and what I experienced is the physical aspect of it. I got wounded more than she did. That's the only difference. Well, they laughed at me too, right before I got hurt. So, don't even start with this vaguely. There's no vaguely to it. Those situations were virtually identical, except I got more physical harm out of it. There we go. Alright. And yes, that was virtually identical. She isn't necessarily bullied per se, more of an awkward. She has a hard time making friends. I'm well aware she has a hard time making friends. But I also am aware that there are real teenage girls right now in the United States that are living her life. That is a fact. You can check it out for yourself. If you don't believe me, ask and you will find out. The ironic thing about fiction is that it often is based on fact. Obviously, you don't do very good in English, or otherwise you would know that by now. Oh well. Okay. And she has a bad social life. The beginning scene shows this. I'm well aware of what the beginning scene shows. I had a bad social life too. And that fictional girl's life and my life were very similar. Okay. If your friend dropped their books, regardless of your personality, you would probably help them. That's true. If somebody dropped their books, I would help them. If you are inconsiderate like those two characters, inconsiderate? They're bullies. Period. End of story. They weren't inconsiderate, they were bullies. End of story. Then you would just sit back and enjoy that funny moment you just saw unfold. Not all bullies do that. These bullies laughed at her. Some bullies attack. I know, I lived it, so don't even argue with me on that one. Now, I also live on the actual street this video was filmed on. I'm so sorry. I am in fact dropped off at the end of the street like this character. Again, I'm sorry. It is no fault of anyone. Really, I call it the fault of the school system, especially after what I'm going to say. It is the bus route. It should be altered. And I assure you, the street is in fact very, very safe. Really? We'll get into that. Well, relatively speaking. But that doesn't really matter as this video is fictional. Well, then let's bring in some reality, shall we? Hey, but hold on. And should be left to suspension of disbelief as the walk looks relatively short anyway. Okay. Relatively safe streets. Why don't you tell that to 9-year-old Angie Houseman? On November 18th, 1993, she was kidnapped and killed 10 miles from St. Louis on what was called a relatively safe street. And if you don't believe me, you can actually look up the story. You can ask the neighbors that were there, and they will tell you just how unsafe their street was, even though they thought it was safe. But let's go on. How about all these kids that get abducted from their houses? Take Elizabeth Smart. She was abducted from her house. She lived. How about Rosie Tapia? She got kidnapped in 1995, and she's dead. How about Sierra Newbold? She gets kidnapped in June of 2012, and she's killed. Safe? Safe? There is no safe. Where do you get this idea that there are places that are safe? Really? You write this on the very day that in Connecticut, all 20 elementary school children are slaughtered in what is supposed to be in a safe school? And you talk about safe? Think again. There is no such thing as safe. Period. So I debunked your argument 120%. That was unrealistic and should not have been done. Okay. Also, I apologize that not everybody's parents can be as supportive as yours. I feel bad about that too. I really do. Her parent obviously does not care. You're absolutely right. And unfortunately, since so many young ladies live that kind of life, it's sad to see that their parents really don't care. And they should be chastened for that. Okay? She would not take the time out of her day to teach her daughter how to prepare her own meals and obviously did not feel like cooking for her at all. Well, there's an answer to that. For you young ladies that emulate this life that you saw in that film, my recommendation to you is on the weekends, go to these YouTube cooking channels and you learn for yourself how to cook. And when you prepare your week's meals, freeze them up, put them in the freezer, have them ready to go, and that way throughout the week you don't have to worry about what your parents will or will not cook for you. I'm sorry it has to be that way. I don't want it to be that way, but that's about the best solution I can give you. If they're not going to care for you, you can care for yourself. And there are plenty of cooking channels here on YouTube that will teach you how to make just about anything you want. I would start with simple dishes first and then move on. Be careful, we don't want you getting hurt. Just take it slow and easy. Like I said, find simple meals first and then move on. But do it on your weekends. Okay? Besides, your parents might admire you for it. Who knows? Also, why in the blankety blank are you talking about getting her enrolled in AP courses? Because she looked like she was being bullied. Okay? And since so many young teenage girls live that life, then I really address them and say, you don't have to live that life. You can get your education so high that you can be placed in AP courses and move away from those bullies for good. Plus, you'll be able to demonstrate to all these wonderful people just how smart you really are, and there are people out there that really admire intelligence. I'm not the only one, I assure you. Okay? Okay, let me read this again. Also, why in the blankety blank are you talking about getting her enrolled in AP courses and finding like-minded people for her when she is, as you stated, fictional? Because there are too many teenage girls that are living that life. So I'm really talking to the ones that are just like her. For all you know, she could be in those courses. Well, you should have clearly stated that in the video, in the film. Should have stated that clearly. But her school life outside of her social life was not displayed. I'm sorry for that. Same goes for the whole tangent about buying rechargeable batteries over lithium and the size of the tripod she is using. Well, I just stated a couple of facts. When you buy a digital camera, you should have rechargeable batteries over the lithium because of the price difference. Be a thrifty spender. Be a smart spender. Don't waste money, especially when you have so little allowance money. And that's what this gal was operating on, was allowance money. If you don't have a whole lot of it, you want to have a rechargeable battery whenever possible. Okay. And the tripod thing, like I said, you don't need that big of a tripod. Really. I operate without one. I mean, I do have a big tripod, but I don't use it all the time. Obviously, tripods of that size are not that expensive, but if you're riding with a very minimal amount of allowance money, I just wouldn't spend that much money. Not unless you have to. Besides, lugging that thing around is a pain in the butt. Having a little tiny tripod, you practically put this thing in your pocket. Honestly, you try to sound intellectual. I don't try to sound intellectual. I am intellectual. I am a level 1 data processor. Now, that's not to boast. That is a fact. The fact of the matter is, I do know how to speak, read, and write Italian. The fact of the matter is, I do know accounting. The fact of the matter is, I do know how to program in COBOL and in Visual Basic. And I also have programmed with XML. Those are facts. Okay? And yes, fact, I have built 4 successful computers. So I know how a computer works. I know what a charged coupled device is. I have made hundreds of these videos to teach you all this stuff. And yes, I have actually demonstrated all the proofs of the first 6 books of Euclid's Elements. I have discussed quadratic reciprocity. So I am not stupid by any means. So I don't sound intellectual, I am intellectual. And yes, thanks to Harry Lorraine's memory book, I am able to memorize stories very quickly and present them here on YouTube. I just decided not to memorize that because I don't want to remember all that. Those stories about, I don't want to memorize Angie Houseman. I could, but I don't want to. I don't want to memorize Elizabeth Smart or Rosie Tapia or Sierra Newbold. I don't want to remember those things. Those are sad things to remember. I'd rather remember happier things. But I am slowly memorizing the chemistry table. I am memorizing statistics. I am memorizing all this wonderful stuff and presenting it here on YouTube. So, I don't sound intellectual, I am intellectual. That's the difference. You sound intellectual, I am intellectual. But anyone with a vaguely functional system of logic, I do have a functioning system of logic, it seems that you don't, can see through your analyzations. Oh, really? Well, I'd like to see you go through this one. And honestly, most people are mad not because of the content, but the fact that you took the time out of your life, a man of at least 40 years old, to badmouth the very first successful video of a person that works incredibly hard to make quality content. Well, if they'd worked incredibly hard to make quality content, they would have taken all these factors into consideration, and they would have put all that in the video too. But they didn't. So I have every right to critique all this stuff. This person took the life experiences of hundreds, if not thousands, of teenage young ladies and made a fictitious video out of it, without considering all the ramifications of what this person was doing. So, who's the intellectual now? I have every right to critique this, and I'm not going to stop critiquing this until all this stuff is fixed. Or until people listen to me and develop enough of a rational mind to understand what I've just said. And not just to understand it, but to comprehend it and to remember it. Look, if this guy wants to make a story out of my life, let him come down here and I will give him a story. And I'll give him the most memorable thing he'll ever have. We'll give him some things to think about. There you are. So, hopefully I have settled all this once and for all. If you need me to, I will dig up a ton more facts and present them here on YouTube. Who's the intellectual now? I will tell you more in a future video, so stay tuned.